Cybercrime Junkies. I am your host, David Morrow, and in the studio today we have Phillip Wylie, the hacker maker, author of The Pen Tester Blueprints, Starting a Career as an Ethical Hacker. Fantastic book. There'll be links in the show notes. Uh, Person of many skill sets, holds many certs, to name a few: the CISSP, the OSCP, and then most relevantly, probably the GWAPT, with over 2 decades of experience in the financial and the consumer product industries. He's got an exciting new role with CYE, CYE Security, and more on that in just a second. He's a highly sought after public speaker, frequently presents at top national and regional conferences. Our friend Phillip Wylie, welcome back, sir.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor. Had a great
Yeah,
time last time and looking forward to it again today.
absolutely. So, have you guys been hit by these storms lately? There've been a whole bunch lately.
Within the past week or so, no, but we've had quite a few. But fortunately, we've kind of dodged. In here in Texas, we have tornado season, and it's always worrisome. Actually, the other day, I guess we got a very short storm, some hail, but we're expecting worse. So fortunately, it wasn't. So how about you?
Yeah, no, I know that, like, there's storm chasers and stuff all throughout, like, Oklahoma and Texas, as well as here in the Midwest. Or in the Indianapolis area. Yeah, we got hit by like a EF3 that hit about a quarter mile from the studio, and
Oh wow.
knocked out internet for a while and messed up. Like, we normally have like this video intro that we do. We don't have that today, or the outro, but it will be on the fully edited final version of this. So, let's pick up where we left off, and some great things have happened since we last talked. Tell us about your new role at CYE Security, and kind of what all they do, etc.
Sure. Actually, the company, the way they say the name, I didn't know until I joined either. I thought CYE, but it's CYE.
Oh, I'm sorry. And
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Okay. All
Yeah. And
apologies to ownership. We're
it's
sorry.
it's
So
a
cool.
cybersecurity company based out of Israel. And an
Yeah.
interesting fact to kind of clue people in that I learned this when I was at Psycognito, because they also had CY at the beginning of the name. It's kind of a
Mhm.
popular part of Israeli company names is to have that CY at the
Interesting.
beginning, short for cyber.
For
Uh,
cyber.
but
Yeah.
at any rate, it's interesting. Psy started out in the services side of things. They were a red team company, but they did offer some incident response services. So they started out as a services company, and they created the hybrid platform, which takes all the input from these pen tests and red team operations, pulls it into a console, and kind of gives you actionable, useful information. Usually you get a pen test report. Sometimes it's not always useful, but they take a risk-based approach.
Oh,
They
that's
will
good.
actually show you like an attack map. So they will show you a graph of this vulnerability, where this is the entry point where someone could get chained through these vulnerabilities, what they could exploit, and even show monetary values of possible breaches, including like PCI fines and stuff. Interesting
Oh, that's
information
good.
that, yeah,
So it can socialize it for people, right? Because a lot of
yes,
times when you're presenting those reports on a pen test report, right, it's not
yeah,
going to just the IT team, right? It makes it to leadership and
yep,
executives, and they're not very technical
yeah.
often, or even if they are, they still have to understand the operational impact, the business impact of the risk.
Yeah, definitely. Whenever they can see that, even the ones that are technical, at the end of the day, they got to give information to someone that shows how big a risk is this, what's the impact. When they see the money attached to it, sometimes they're more likely to come up with a budget to remediate or make sure things get remediated. And through this platform, you're able to prioritize what needs to be remediated, seeing what's impacted, how much that would cost, and all that. And so it's pretty interesting platform. I've seen some similarities in other platforms, but to go beyond CVSS scores and CVEs and get into what can actually happen, and show a map on that. This is actionable things that you can show someone that red teamers or some security folks understand, be able to put it in this easy to understand format where you can see the risks and possibilities, probabilities of these attacks. being
Yeah,
breached.
and I think it helps with an important skill set, and that is once you break into cyber, right, and you are helping, whether it's on the blue side, red side, doesn't matter. But once you're doing that, that necessary skill set of being able to make that internal business case for funding for an initiative, for communicating and relaying the data in practical business terms for an organization. And whether it's even if it's a nonprofit, you still have to articulate that in a clear, concise, meaningful way for the initiatives and what's core to them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, what's your role there?
So my title is security solutions specialist, but a lot of my role is I
Yeah, I'm
work
not
with.
asking about the title though.
Yeah,
My title changes all the time.
yeah,
What are
it's
you actually doing, right?
it's interesting because there was actually a conversation whenever they're making me offer. What are we going to call the title? Which is kind of a unique role. Part of what I do is evangelism. So the things
Mm-hmm.
I do, like this, speaking at
Yeah,
conferences, speaking on the offensive cybersecurity topic, it work under the marketing team. So anytime where
that's
there's
great.
opportunities for working booths at conferences or doing
Yep,
some talks on behalf of the company, that and working with marketing, helping them with the marketing message, because there's a lot of times when you work on marketing teams, maybe the people were technical at one time, but maybe they've been away from it and they don't, or maybe they don't understand this area of technology. But with my background, I'm able to help them with wording, make sure we're accurate, we can make sure we're not making claims that aren't true, because sometimes if you don't
absolutely.
have that background, you don't understand it. And that, and working with kind of the marketing teams to educate them more on the cybersecurity side of things so they can better
Well, there's
explain the
terms of
benefits of the
art,
product.
right? Exactly.
Yeah.
You don't. Terms of art are very important, right? To get it right, and then being very real with the language, right?
Yeah.
You never want to overclaim anything, and that's really important, right? Because so many of these tool sets and platforms and services, like they have great value. Organizations need them, right? But how we communicate sometimes when we overpromise, you know
Yes.
it destroys expectations, and they're like, well, if I buy this one thing, I am secure. It's like, no, understand the context of it, but you need this because of XYZ.
And when they're
Right?
talking to, and whenever you're speaking with people that are subject matter experts in the field of cybersecurity, they're going to scrutinize more. If you're saying your product does
Absolutely.
automated red teaming and there's no
Right.
exploitation to it,
Right.
they may be innocently stating this, but sometimes the person you're trying to sell to,
We'll
sees it
see
as
through that and
dishonest.
they'll
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Sure. That's great. That's great. So, we had been talking about different approaches to enter cybersecurity. So, and one of the questions I wanted to ask you last time was, your experience is obviously very well entrenched in the red team side, and what I'm what I get the sense of, and I think it's pretty commonly known, obviously, but people that aren't in the industry might not know this, but there seems to be more opportunities to migrate over. Like the default seems to be migrating over to the blue side. It seems like businesses and organizations tend to hire, or there tends to be more job postings for that, but there's still a lot of opportunity on the red side. So, like, walk us through like some good approaches and what you're seeing.
Yeah, one of the things too, and as you mentioned, there's other jobs, there's more. I mean, because really you don't need as many people to assess the security as you do to have people to put the security into place. Your GRC folks, there's so many other different roles. This is just one of them. And one of the things I would advise anyone to do that's considering this is to go to some conferences,
Yep.
watch streams like this, podcasts, different types of opportunities to learn about the different roles. Because one of the examples I like to share is one of my former coworkers from US Bank. I had him on my podcast last year. An interesting thing was that I learned during that podcast that I didn't know was, he'd been with the bank for a while. So he
Mm.
started out in IT. He was taking SANS courses to learn digital forensics and incident response. So he'd been through all these courses and thought, maybe if I took a pen testing course, it would make me better
Really
at digital forensics. He took
interesting.
this, yeah, he took the SANS GPen course and he decided he wanted to be a pen tester. He enjoyed it more. And so that's really,
Yeah.
people need to experiment and try the things to find their true passion, because you're going to be a lot better if it's something you're passionate about. Sometimes passion will trump raw talent because you're able to put in the time. It's fun. It's relatable to, maybe gaming or something, that you're able to do activities to help, build these skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, certifications have their place, right? I mean,
Yes.
absolutely. More than getting the certification, the study of it, because back in the day there weren't that many certs anyway. Now there's a million of them. But what I find is like just understanding, being able to explain what you learned from that cert, right, and how you would apply it in real terms, I think is really helpful in interviews. Well, what's your sense on certs if somebody wants to get into offensive cybersecurity? It's a
Yes, you
broad
definitely want to.
question. That was a
Yeah.
broad question, but I know you have a lot of insight on that.
Yeah, one of the things you definitely, like, you hit on, that's spot on. If you're wanting to learn this skill set and you're getting a certification, or if you're going, college courses, about the only place I think you could probably get anything related to offensive security would be through like one of the SANS master's degree programs.
Right.
But you're going through these courses, you really need to learn the skills. And one of the things I would say too is anything that you would use in the field, make sure if you're going to college, your art appreciation, music appreciation are probably not going to help you unless you're doing social engineering and you need to use that in your pretext of the persona
Oh,
that you're trying
interesting how
to.
you
Yeah.
threw that in. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
just so true, right?
Try
Yeah.
not to discount everything, but the things you need to really focus on, and, even beyond the technical skills, the soft skills, writing and speaking skills you need to work on. But make sure, if you're going to be, you're wanting to be a pen tester and you're taking some cloud courses, make sure you understand it, because one of the things being a pen tester with, working in security, you need to understand the technology, how to secure the technology. As an offensive security professional, red team, or a pen tester, you have to know the technology, the security, and how to exploit, bypass that security, how to hack
Right.
into it. So you really need to take time to learn those technologies. You may think Windows or Linux is not really needed, but you really need to understand. If you're trying to gain a foothold, you have a shell, a command line to a Windows server or a Linux server, you're going to need to know the command line. You can Google and research, but it's going to slow you down. But it's really important to have these basic skills. And as you mentioned, learning these skills when you're working on these certifications. Another example of one of my colleagues from the local security community here in Dallas, before he got into pen testing, when he was going to college, he took an assembly course. And so now that he's in pen testing, he
Oh,
needs to be able to reverse engineer. When he's taking an assembly course in college, he didn't take it seriously. The exam was basically a question answer type exam. He was able to pass the exam, but not truly know the subject. And then once he's in his professional career, he's got to go back and learn assembly now. So anything that can help you technology wise while you're learn it, not just to pass the exam, because what it's going to do beyond passing an exam is, if you're being interviewed, you may get asked questions that are similar to some of the things you experience in that certification. If you can answer those questions, it's going to go a long way in helping you get the interview. Maybe you don't have the experience, but if you can talk about the subject, answer questions on that subject, and show your mind, how you research things you don't know, you're going to go a long way of doing well in an interview. Because
absolutely.
one of the things I can say too is boot camps are not
I
always a
was
great
just about
option. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just about to ask. There's so many boot camps. Some of them are quite expensive. Some of them have information. Some of them have a lot of information. What's your recommendation on how to pick the right boot camp?
There's some that I've seen, and I'm trying. I can't the names of them escape me, but they're
Mhm.
kind of difficult. But one of the things with boot camps that you got to worry about, and I'd say if you found some, there's some that are, I guess, kind of different, that are more what I refer to as like an immersion course, kind of like some of these immersion courses that they have for developers, where you spend, like these Flatiron schools, and like you go in there, you
Mhm.
spend 3 months, 6 months, and all you're doing 8 hours a day is learning to code. If you find something like that, there's value. But one of the things, my experience, back in my IT days, I got my CCNA through a boot camp, And the problem was when I took that boot camp for a good month, I could answer questions on the topic. But since I wasn't actively using that skill and I basically use a practice test, an exam testing engine to learn the topics, after a month, I couldn't tell you anything about it. I wouldn't
Right.
be able to do anything on a Cisco switch or router. And this was my boot camp experience.
It's very similar to
Yeah,
cramming for tests, right? Like,
yes,
whenever you do that, you have a short-term recollection. You can know enough at that moment in time, it's a snapshot in time, and you can pass that test, right? Or you can have that succinct knowledge set. But over time, if you aren't immersed in it and reading about it and following up about it, you might be hard pressed several months later to be able to articulate some of the things that you learned there.
that is correct. One of the things you got to do, even if it's not a boot camp, like going through the OSCP is a pretty intense
Oh
certification
yeah,
process. And the thing is, you can go through it and learn learn the skills and actually learn it, not just memorize things. But if you're not practicing that after the fact, then it's going to be hard to retain those skills. I mean, it's a
sure.
difficult skill to learn. And so you've got to actively do things to keep that skill up. And you can do that through like try hack me, hack the box, CTFs
Home
and bug
labs, yeah.
bounties.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
Yep.
wanted to ask you, what you just said was really important, and that is, but you need to continue to practice what you learned, right? And so things like try hack me, hack the box, phenomenal, right? Absolutely, tons of value there. And there's so many ways that people can create their own home labs, right?
Yes. Yep.
So walk us through, like, just share with some of the people that are thinking of doing this, kind of what you would suggest in a good approach for a home lab. Like, would they create something and then hack into it and demonstrate to somebody, maybe in an interview or talking at a conference, how they did it?
Sure. Yeah. One of the things, home labs are great. And I used to emphasize this a lot. I still think it's a good thing. But one of the caveats I see with home labs is you build your lab and you come home and say your main focus, you need to really be spending the time hacking away. And you really don't need the experience of installing VMs and all this.
Right.
And sometimes one of the things you can have run into is your technology fails. And one of the experiences I like to share related to that is in my IT career early on, I used to do pen testing as a side gig. I used to not pen testing, I used to do web design. So I designed websites for my customers. I hosted that in my own server at home. So no redundant power,
Ah.
no redundant internet. And I would usually I would take like, I
So
would
if you
get a
have
new
an
PC.
EF3 come in, what happens? Right?
Yeah.
Like,
And so what I run into is I have a hard drive failure. I'd be spending the evening rebuilding my Red Hat Linux server,
ah,
all that rebuild that and restore when I could have been spending time on things that made me money. So when it comes to home
right.
labs, if it's, don't overcomplicate things, I think really work on it. Doesn't hurt to do a home lab. That is an option. But one of the things I would say is these cloud options are really good. But if you're going to build a home lab, uh, take something like VMware, VirtualBox. VirtualBox works
Yeah.
great. I used to use that in my class. Download some vulnerable VMs like the Metasploitable series.
Mhm.
Metasploitable 2 and Metasploitable 3 are great. And the advantage to these is you can go to VulnHub and download some CTF images from some previous CTFs, which are good. But the nice thing about the Metasploitable series is this is equal to servers worth of vulnerabilities. So you're going to find a bunch of exploitable vulnerabilities. uh, Metasploitable 2 runs on Linux. Metasploitable 3 you can install on Windows or Linux, but you need both of those. In your enterprise environments, you're going to run into more Windows. Internet or externally facing, you're doing websites, web app pen testing, you run into more Linux systems. So make sure that you've got that combination there. But the online resources are really good because once you get your Metasploitable series and you're looking for other ones to download, but there's other good ones too, like Juice Shop is good for web app pen testing. You can install that at home, or you can even use Salesforce's cloud platform, which I'm trying to Heroku
Oh,
Cloud.
yeah.
You can
Yeah.
actually there's it's set up. The author of Juice Shop has it set up where you can easily install that in the cloud to practice on that. But yeah, you definitely need the labs, whether it's a home lab or something in the cloud. But I highly recommend the stuff in the cloud.
That's
That
that's helpful, yeah, and just
and this is and
for
this
those
is
that aren't technical yet, right, or they're
yeah,
just beginning, CTFs are like capture the flag
yes,
scenarios, right, where there's a goal. It's like a adversary emulation, almost like a red teaming exercise where there's a goal and you need to hack through to obtain that intellectual property, that hypothetical intellectual property or whatever it is, to capture that flag. I'm just explaining it to for the,
yes.
for the other people. And
Those are
and these home labs, they can be done. Would you suggest somebody use a separate computer than the regular one that they use, right?
yeah,
Set up their own either home server or laptop, PC, etc. So that way it's kind of a contained unit away
yes.
from like your regular work and your regular studies and things like that.
Yes, definitely, because you get like Metasploit, some of the more commercialized or tools, open source tools been around. They're kind of safe, but sometimes when you start downloading exploits, you
You
don't know
just never
what's
know what's in
contained.
there.
Yeah, it could be
Yeah.
backdoored, because not everyone is creating exploits or doing this ethically. So there could be a backdoor in there. It's interesting enough too, thinking of CTF challenges and exploits and all that. I've seen some CTFs and some vulnerable machines that contain like a nmap vulnerability, because there was actually a vulnerability at one point that you could exploit a system that had nmap on it. It
Hmm.
wasn't purposely in place, but it could be used as a backdoor through a vulnerability in nmap. So, you mentioned the tools and having a separate environment. It's another good reason why you'd want to do that.
Yeah, and there's some fun things that they can do too that I think they should at least experiment with. It's not your whole home lab, but things like Flipper, things like the rubber ducky, like things like that. Shouldn't they be aware of? These are devices that you can use to create vulnerabilities or gain access to systems, platforms, Wi-Fi, things like that.
Yeah, it's kind of a good way to explore some other areas that are less common, using things like the Flipper, the Hack 5 gear. They've got some really cool stuff like the rubber ducky. They've got the Wi-Fi pineapple, which really makes Wi-Fi pen testing a lot easier, because otherwise you've got to install all these tools on a Linux system. But this has all your Wi-Fi antennas and network interface cards built into this one device, and it makes it easy to manage. So those are some fun things to play around with and learn, because a lot of those, if you get more into the adversary emulation, some of the physical pen testing, sometimes you'll use like the rubber duckies and some of these other
Right.
devices you need to plug into systems, some of these other Wi-Fi testing
Yep.
devices.
Yep. Yeah, and I think there's a huge allure, at least for people that are just kind of getting in. It seems to me like one of the common themes when I do this podcast, I'm meeting all these people in the security community, and people come from all different backgrounds. It's amazing, right? Like a
Mhm.
lot of people, like I was an English major, I was a professional wrestler. That's you. Like there's all
Yeah.
these different people that come from backgrounds that you would not the traditional route. Like I'm graduating high school, I'm going to go into informatics, or I'm going to go into computer science, and then I'm going to work, get some certs and then interview, like that traditional route. People are coming in from all over, and what I love is that people, because a lot of companies out there are hiring for SOC analyst roles, things like that. So they start there, but then in their home labs, right, they're having fun with it. And then they're like, I really want to find a pen testing job. One of the listeners just said, I work in a SOC now. I'm finding myself more and more attracted to threat intel. It's so fascinating, right? Like I love to hear that. Like just your whole point about experimenting. I think that's so, so important.
Yeah, and to add to that, a lot of those other areas are very interesting. I mean, you hear about the thread hunting and all this other stuff that sounds really cool. I mean, SOC is an ideal role to start out in cybersecurity, because the cool thing, if you're wanting to get an incident response, thread hunting,
Yeah.
there's so many different areas that you can move into that are really interesting, because everyone sees Mr. Robot or some of these movies and the hacking looks
Yeah.
fun. But at the end of the day, when I'm not trying to discourage anyone from doing it, but it's also work too. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to write reports. It's not always fun and games, but try some of these other things out, and you know as we mentioned, moving into these different entry level roles, there's things you may discover that you rather do instead. And as technology evolves, you may be starting out in security, and who knows what the next latest and greatest cool thing could be that, maybe your role is setting you up for that instead of maybe red teaming. Not to discourage anyone from doing that,
Right.
but not only that's not the only fun thing to do in security. There's a lot of really neat things that you can do.
Oh, absolutely. And some of the tools that SOC teams are getting are just so dynamic, and I just find them fascinating. Let me ask you. I've always wanted to ask you this. So, what's like one of the most first, like, what's the most common kind of vulnerability that you find when that you've encountered in your years when you're doing pen testing work?
Most common and probably the kind of most boring is like the SSL and TLS related vulnerabilities. A lot of cases they're not exploitable, but you have to prove that they're vulnerable, because when you're doing a pen test, you just don't take the output of Nessus or Nexpose or Qualys,
Right.
whatever vulnerability scanner, just at face value. You need to validate to make sure it's not a false positive. So you have to find other ways using Nmap, Metasploit, and other tools or manual methods to validate those vulnerabilities. So that's probably one of the most common that you see now. But one of the things you don't see as much now is SQL injection vulnerabilities where you can
Mm-hmm.
actually get command
Yep.
line access or system control.
Just
Because one of my
flood a website with a million inquiries, have it basically regurgitate or go down, right?
Yeah, because back in 2014, I had a pen test, a web app pen test, where I was able to get command line access through a SQL injection vulnerability. In a lot of cases anymore, you might be lucky to see some output that you're not supposed to see. Sometimes not very useful information, but back then you were able to possibly get command line access to a system from the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me ask you this then. Those are kind of the most common ones, but like what's the strangest one? Like what's one of the most bizarre ones or shocking ones that you came across?
One of the most interesting, and it's kind of old news now, is shell shock was kind of interesting, because shell shock, you could send like HTTP requests to that system. So it was kind of interesting some of the things you could do there. Sometimes you could get a little further than just screen output, but some of those were kind of interesting that you're able to take something like that, send like an HTTP query to a system. And the funny thing is you look at all the things affected by web services, like your print servers, different administrative devices on a network could be vulnerable to that. So your print servers were actually vulnerable to shell shock back then. And you don't see that as much. I mean, if you get into some place that's not properly patched, or maybe it's an OT environment where they can't update a system and it's outdated, you may see that, but you don't see that as much.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the listeners asked. So they said, "I'm on Discord. That's my main pipeline to the hacking community." And someone else brought up Jerry Odgers. Simply Cyber, phenomenal. Jerry does great stuff. He's got a great YouTube channel. But they also talked about LinkedIn. You're really active on LinkedIn. I'm really active on LinkedIn. I think it's a great I'm I'm involved in a couple different roles, right? I have a business operational, business development role as well, and I find that the LinkedIn obviously is geared toward that, but it has got a phenomenal security community.
Yes.
I would encourage people to like get involved in the LinkedIn platform, like create a good profile, but like follow the people, like engage with them. And when I say engage, I mean like comment, ask questions of people when they make a post, right? Because usually a post, there's a thing they're trying to get through, and it doesn't really let them explain it all. By asking questions, it really engages a conversation. And people are they're really, really helpful for people that want to find employment, find opportunities, see what's out there, connect to the hiring managers, reach out to them. It's a really good platform. So I just wanted to address that. That was in some of the
Yeah.
conversations of the people attending.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. LinkedIn is very important. One of the other platforms I would recommend people get on if you're trying to learn some different hacking skills, different cybersecurity, blue team skills, whatever instant response, Twitter is still a good platform for
Mhm.
getting the technical resources. But as you mentioned, LinkedIn from the
Yeah, and
professional
Mastodon is
perspective.
starting. Yeah,
Yeah,
Mastodon is starting. It's newer, right? But
yeah,
it's starting. There's a lot of good resources there. Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I like about LinkedIn is almost all the main players also have a LinkedIn element to
yes,
it, but then
yeah,
the hiring managers ultimately
definitely.
are on there too. So
Yeah,
it's kind of good to be able to demonstrate your passion for it, even by asking questions and things like that, engaging. Um, when a hiring manager looks at you, trust me, they're all going to look at your LinkedIn. That's like the
definitely.
first thing that they're going to look at, and they're going to look at your posts and the questions that you're asking. And they're going to be like, "Oh, this person is entrenched. Like they understand it. They're passionate about it." It's a good way of explaining it.
Yeah, plus the nice thing about LinkedIn too is you can export your profile as a resume, so you can save it as a
Yeah.
resume. So as long as you keep that up to date, every
Yep.
little update and keep that correct, then you've got that to use as your resume, definitely.
Yep.
And yeah, it's kind of funny mentioning that because I was talking when I got the job at CYE, I was sharing with the class I used to teach at Dallas College. Uh, the instructor asked me to come in and speak to the class back in January. And it's funny, I was telling the students how important networking was, how important, going to different meetups, different conferences, and
Oh
LinkedIn,
yeah.
how important networking was. And when I got out of class, I had a direct message from Ira Winkler on LinkedIn said, I'm not sure if you still like where you're at, but if you're not, I would love to get you over here. And so, like, most of the jobs I get anymore, Psycognito, that was from a reference. My second pen test job going from Verizon to AT&T was a
Huh?
referral from someone in our local cybersecurity community from the Dallas Hackers Association. My job at US Bank was from someone I connected with at a Dallas OWASP chapter meeting. So all these have been since I've been in pen testing, most of my jobs have been from referrals
Yeah.
and people
So
I've
so
connected with on
through yeah.
LinkedIn. Yep.
So like leveraging LinkedIn while also attending these uh, events, right?
Yep.
Yeah, that's great. We had a question. Is that okay if I
Sure.
bring this up because
Sure.
I thought it was good. Um, Mohammed asks, "Hi Philip, what advice would you give someone who's trying to break into OTICS cybersecurity industry? Any recommended training courses, or I'm trying to read it around my camera, or certs? So, what guidance can you provide?"
Yeah, there's actually, I'm trying to think because the US Department of Energy has some courses that they offer that are free or low price.
Hmm.
Uh, but also you have SANS. SANS has a lot of great ICS OT. They just recently had their ICS OT summit in Orlando, Florida. I got to attend that. I used to work for Kimberly Clark, and we had OT
Oh
and
yeah,
ICS environments. So I got to take a ICS pen testing course. So they've got all sorts of stuff for OT and ICS through SANS. If you look up Cutaway
oh yeah,
Security,
right.
he's got a lot of great free resources there. So I would follow him. He also was I found him through the SANS course I took. He was teaching the ICS and OT course. If you go to some of these conferences, they have the ICS and OT villages. Those are great resources there to connect with some people and learn. Uh, trying to
Mark,
think.
yeah, Mark Harvey said ICS 410 looks neat as well.
Yeah, they've got some good stuff, and they got like it's interesting because they actually have an ICS CTF. So one of the nights there,
Mm.
or 2 nights, they have an ICS CTF with all these PLCs and different devices connected, and you try to hack into it. So they've got a lot of stuff. I mean, they bring in the actual hardware and things. I mean, it's really hard to find that training elsewhere, but that's one of the places I would look. Yeah.
So let me break down what were those acronyms you just used. Just for I know that a lot
Yeah.
of the people watching do this, but there is going to be tens of thousands of people that will listen to this later that are like ICS,
Yes.
CTF. CTF is that capture the flag thing that we
Yep.
talked about
Capture the
before,
flag,
and ICS is like industrial
industrial
control
control
systems.
systems. Yep.
Right.
And
It's a critical
yeah.
infrastructure, right? Like
And
power grids, water treatment plants, things like that, right?
and OT is operational technology, and that's comparison to if you're in an office, a corporate we use information technology. They use operational technology. It's a different term used for those type of systems, but in a sense, it's basically the IT infrastructure for ICS.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, and once somebody gets into that, or if they are in that field, we had Josh Fulmer on a few weeks back, and he is one of the head recruiters with Dragos, and Dragos is right there in the
Yes.
ICS space, and they recruit actively, even currently, even despite a lot of the tech layoffs. So he's very active on LinkedIn. So reach out to Josh Fulmer
And
on that as well.
since you mentioned Dragos Ice, they offer some ICS courses too. Because when I was
Yeah.
looking for some courses a while back, they had some courses.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
also one of the things too, some of the skills you need is also like some of the hardware hacking skills, some of the radio frequency hacking. That's some of the stuff we covered in the SANS courses. And sometimes maybe if your company or yourself, you don't have the budget for those. I did this talk several years ago called Reversing Education, and basically is showing to look at the agenda for the curriculum for a course, look at that and figure out what's needed for that course. You'll get to see the different details of what they're teaching and go out and just research and find information on that. So if you go look at the SANS courses and go look at some of the things that the elements they have involved in that, look for those and look for the technologies, and you could probably find some free information out there related to that, or even maybe some books that are helpful, and go that route. Because one of the things we did in the SANS courses is we had like a practice PLC. Some of the IoT stuff you're getting in, that's more IoT is more the consumer or less the industrial side of things, but there's a lot of similarities there. Some IoT courses, Adify, they have some different hardware hacking things that you can look in, help you build some of those hardware hacking skills and some wireless hacking skills and
That's
security skills.
that's excellent. So let me ask you this: as an ethical hacker, as a red teamer that's engaged by an organization to find their vulnerabilities, right? What have you ever had the scenario happen to you where you've hacked in, you found the vulnerability, but the client wasn't comfortable or wouldn't address it, like they wouldn't remediate it? Like, how did you handle that? Because I know that that comes up sometimes.
Yes, one of the interesting enough that example I gave earlier of getting command line access from a SQL injection vulnerability, when I submitted the pen test report, they said, "Oh, this is a development environment. It's not production, so we're not going to fix it." And the problem there was
Mm,
this was an application. Only the application was in scope. So if it would have been more of a full external pen test, then I would have had during the according to the rules of engagement, I could have went from that system to another one. But when I got command line access to the system, I was able to dump the password hash, crack it. The password was password all lowercase number one.
wow,
So if
really?
I was, yeah, so if I was a bad guy and I wasn't limited by
And
scope,
they wonder why the
yeah,
US is getting pummeled.
definitely. There's times we need to do risk acceptances, but we need to use them wisely. Just because the development box don't take, I mean, it's a pivot point. It's an entry
Right.
point into that environment. If if I would have been a malicious hacker, I could have pivoted from that system. There's a good likelihood that that password number one was used on other systems, reused in that organization. I could have gained access to something as production. Sometimes development systems have actual uh, real data on there. Sometimes they put test
Mm,
data in there. They don't really do a good job of cleansing it when they put that on there. So there's a lot of risks there. So cyber insurance, risk acceptances, all that stuff needs to be approached and used the way it's intended to, and not just as an excuse or a way around things.
absolutely. And just a lot of times you see just basic hygiene, just basic cyber hygiene is just not implemented. And
Mhm.
that could be done through policies. That could be done through things that don't cost that much. It's just that the people have to take it seriously, right?
Yes.
And actually value security, which gets into that whole making the internal business case and being an advocate. for the importance of security in organizations. Because while we all get it, and everybody, watching and everything has a passion for it, a lot of the people that we work for or that we advise and we, provide counsel to, don't necessarily get it. Right. And so we really need to kind of learn to advocate for it. Hey, I wanted to ask you about this. It was in the news, and the FDA is now requiring that devices be secured against cyber attacks. So the Food and Drug Administration is now requiring medical devices meet specific cybersecurity guidelines, right? After like years of concerns that a growing number of Internet of Things, medical devices that are connected, hospitals, healthcare, that there's clear vulnerabilities. It was this last week, the FDA ruled that all new medical device applicants must now submit a plan to monitor, identify, and address cybersecurity issues, and then also create a process that provides like reasonable assurance. Those are the buzzwords there, that the device is going to be protected. Um, what are you, obviously you're aware of this, but like
Yeah.
what was your feedback? What are your initial thoughts on that?
When I saw it, it was great to see, but this is something that really should have happened a lot sooner because of the
Yeah.
capabilities. I mean, I'm trying to think when I first heard about one of the first insulin pumps someone was able to figure out how to hack. That's been close to 10 years ago.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
the
there's
thing
there've been reports that I found anyway, insulin pumps, defibrillators,
yeah,
mobile, cardiac telemetry, and even pacemakers. I mean,
mhm,
that's
yeah,
scary, right? That stuff you just assume would have been locked down,
you would
you know?
think. And
You would
and the thing
think.
is, yeah, I mean, the perfect attack, you wanna assassinate, someone is trying to assassinate a leader or anyone for that matter. It's gonna be hard to track, wireless technology, Bluetooth or whatever. It's gonna be hard to track. I mean, and when people will try to hack into water treatment plants to poison the citizens of a city than one-off people on a medical device. And one of the things that really saw the need for that back earlier in my career, I was doing a Wi-Fi pen test for a hospital chain in the Northeast. And during the pen test, I was doing my scans, scanning the just collecting the different wireless traffic, and I was seeing medical devices connected to that Wi-Fi network. And in one case, I was testing one hospital. It was supposed to be a pen test, and we ended up moving to. I talked to the CISO of the hospital, and we changed the scope of the pen test. So instead of actually doing a pen test, I did a vulnerability assessment and then did a security configuration review of their Wi-Fi controllers and devices
Oh,
to go
wow.
that route instead of taking the risk of running trying to exploit devices on the network to get that to perform that test. But just seeing those devices connected. A year or two later, I was doing a pen test for a company that made medical devices, and while I was doing a Wi-Fi pen test, while none of these were actually being used on people,
Right.
just the fact seeing it connected on Wi-Fi, just kind of seeing the risks and dangers of that
Yeah.
if it in
Yeah.
a real life scenario.
Yeah, I'm showing on the screen the FBI notification that came out in September, and that report I read into it, and they cited research that found 53%. That's a huge percentage, right? Of all digital medical devices and other internet connected products in hospitals and healthcare facilities had known critical vulnerabilities. So, and that was things like the insulin pumps, the defibrillators, the telemetry devices, and the pacemakers. So, I mean, it seems like it's been needed for a long, long time. One of the listeners said, really common to see manufacturing or healthcare systems running old, unpatched OSs like Windows XP, right? And updating, that it's not supported, it's end of life, right? And that's really kind of shocking. Somebody just said, yeah, nothing like finding an X-ray or an MRI connected to an old XP machine. I mean, this is actually pretty common. I've seen it
Yeah.
myself in healthcare organizations. Um, what do you think the rollout will be of this? Will this be? And it's interesting that the FDA is kind of getting it. I mean, the FDA has to approve the device in the first place, but I'm curious whether whether that will then be directly related to uh, HIPAA as as another governing potential liability for healthcare organizations that don't do it.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're going to look at too is technology that's in place already.
Hmm.
These that ways to remediate these, insecure devices, and like some of the hospitals and things going back and requiring this to be part of a security assessment or a pen test to go back and make sure these devices are secure, because that's going to be the major problem. Say everything starts rolling out correctly, has security in place, you still got all these legacy systems out there that aren't secure. So taking care of those is going to be the major headache, because you think about all these vulnerabilities and existing companies or OT and ICS environments, but just think of the medical devices that are already out there. So that's going to
Yeah.
address in some way. It's
Well,
really going to,
especially devices that aren't even located in the hospital, but they're
yes,
implanted in humans, and
yeah,
then the humans
definitely.
are walking around.
That's going to be the
Like,
more difficult thing.
yeah,
Doctors are really going to have to, someone's got to really, uh, you know, educate these medical professionals, these doctors and stuff, to ask questions of their patients when they come in. If they have people who are using pacemakers, request them, or recommend them get new pacemakers, replace the insecure devices with new ones. That's going to be a large undertaking, but definitely something that needs to be done.
yeah. And a question I had is, I understand this will be like a new regulation for new applications, but what do we do about all the stuff that's already out there? Like,
Yeah,
does
that's
anybody know? Do any of the listeners know? Like, how is this going to be rolled out? Because the FDA isn't really involved in the compliance piece of that. Are they going to have to rely on HIPAA and other aspects to drive that? I mean, that just seems like a colossal mess.
one of the things they have to do, but I don't know how they keep track of the patients that have these devices. But you'd also almost need like a recall notice to go out
Yeah.
to individuals saying, yeah, you've got a device that's insecure, you need to get it replaced or whatever. And then I don't know. I think there needs to also be, these manufacturers should be responsible for some kind of discounted devices. Give some kind of discount for them to replace this, because it's not the person's fault that they got something that's
Oh, of course not.
insecure.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and then somebody asks, but then who pays for the new device, right? Yeah, and that's the whole issue. Why should the patient
Yep.
bear that
No,
burden
the
when?
patient shouldn't have to.
Right,
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. And somebody just brought up too, Mark Harvey again. Also, had one instance of a sonogram machine getting ransomware on it. Right, the machine had built-in versions of Windows and storage. And that really, really gets in. I had a relative in the hospital recently, and right at the nursing station, and actually in the room with them, right next to the nursing station that was in the room, there's a big sign about ransomware, about not clicking on things, about all of these big warnings. I mean, like, I was glad to see that warning there, because it's obvious that so many people are kind of still clueless about it. We all see it. We're all involved. All the listeners, you, me, others in the community. But it's really something that, again, we have to socialize it. We have to get it outside of our community and put it in practical English terms. And to me, that has to be simplified, right? We have to just explain, like, do you realize this can happen if these basic steps aren't taken?
Actually, whenever some of these first things started happening, some of the first instances of pacemakers and that sort of thing, I thought, that's kind of a need for a product out there. Someone to make a Faraday T-shirt, someone that can wear some kind of clothing or Faraday device to block or shield insulin pumps
Oh
or
yeah.
pacemakers.
Yeah. That's phenomenal. So as we wrap up here, Phil, excellent discussion. Tell us what's coming up. Do you have conferences that people can come see you? What's on your horizon?
Sure. Next month, this month actually now is fairly busy, so I'm going to be at Hack Space Con at Kennedy Space Center
Oh, that's
this
cool.
month. And the cool thing about the conference is they're doing like a 1 day training that they're offering training
Oh,
like on the first day, and it's free. You don't even have to have a ticket to the conference, but you do have to sign up. And one of the things I'm doing for
what's the
my
training
workshop,
gonna be on? Yeah, what's the training gonna be on?
yeah, my training is going to be kickstarting your pen testing career with the pen tester blueprint. And so
Great.
I'm giving a session, giving career advice, going over pen testing in general, but then we get into uh, a way to get experience, like we discussed how, getting CVEs, using CTFs, different types of methods to get the hacking skills, how to demonstrate those. But I'm also giving away a book to the first 30 people in the
Oh,
class. So I'm
fantastic.
giving away
Oh,
the pen
that's
tester
great.
blueprint.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's great.
so that one
Yeah,
will be fun. It's pretty amazing the
and
people
when
that are
is
showing
that?
up for that.
Yeah, is that in late April?
Let me take a look at my calendar. That is actually next week. So the
Alright.
13th through the 14th.
That's, at the Kennedy Space Center?
Yes. And so, like I
Fantastic.
said, the one day, if you sign up for the one day trainings, you can get those for free. You don't even have to have a ticket to the conference. You can see those outside of that. But then to see the conference, you have to have a ticket to the conference.
Sure. But that's a good
Also,
way to go and meet people, meet you in
definitely.
person, and then get training, and there's no cost.
Yeah, for instance, some of the people that's going to be there, Bo Bullock from Black Hills Information Security Group, he's
Great.
doing a cloud pen testing course. There's also Jason Haddix is going to be there.
Excellent.
The Cyber Mentor is going to be there. Josh Mason, you've
Of
talked to
course.
Josh before.
Josh
Josh
is
is
a
going to be
good
there.
great guy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
a
that's
lot of
great.
people. Yeah, I'm really surprised, because normally we have to wait till DEF CON for these type of
Right.
conferences. But I mean, it's the blind hacker, Joe Brinkley, he's going to be there as well.
Wow,
Uh,
that's fantastic.
a lot of
That's
good,
great.
they got some paid training there too, but it's the free stuff is, but just the opportunity of the people you get to meet. I'm also the week after that at at Atlantic SecCon in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
And, and then I'll be at RSA. So I'm doing a talk in
What's
the
your talk
adversary
at
sandbox.
RSA on?
It's going to be on the adversary mindset. So just kind of
Mm,
I did that talk I've given that talk at
yep.
uh, the village at DEF CON, the
Well,
adversary village.
that's a good talk too, because you actually have a different insight than a lot of people would assume. So I think that's something people should definitely catch. And the alt one up in Halifax, what's the topic
Yes.
there?
That one I'm doing my talk on using external attack surface management to secure
Hmm.
APIs. So I've
Oh,
given that
okay.
talk
Yeah.
several times, but that one it's interesting because the people that run that, one of the guys works for Layers Consulting, a boutique pen testing firm that puts that on. So they're just starting back up from the pandemic. So I'm excited about this because it'll be my first time speaking in a Canadian conference.
Yeah, that's great. They're very polite up there. It's really
Yeah.
good. We go there quite a bit. So one of the listeners asked, "Can we attend remotely?" Um, I don't
So
know actually.
I'm, I don't know. I don't think the Hack SpaceCon stuff is available virtually. I'm not sure about Atlantic SecCon. I'm not sure. I
Okay.
don't think those are available, but there are some opportunities. One of the things too with the workshop that I'm doing at Hack SpaceCon, I'm planning to do a workshop just outside of any conferences, virtual, so anyone can attend that. So once I get a date and time set for that, I'll be sharing on LinkedIn.
Oh, fantastic. And we will share that out. So, all right. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Phillip Wylie, thank you so much, man. Like it is always a pleasure. I always learn so many things when I talk to you. So look to catch Phillip at the upcoming places. If you haven't grabbed his book, there will be a link in the show notes. Check it out, or check out Phillip himself, and definitely connect with him on LinkedIn, because always good content.
Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks
All
everyone
right.
for joining.
Thanks. See you, everybody.
Hey, well, that's a wrap. Thank you for listening. Our next episode starts right now.
Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's free, and download the podcast episodes available everywhere you get podcasts.
To support our show and get exclusive pre-release episodes and bonus content, please subscribe to Cybercrime Junkies Prime.
Link in the description and show notes. And thanks for being a cybercrime junkie.